Hello again, and welcome back to another FMOD and Unity tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at fade-ins and fade-outs, and how we can make them adaptive and, change depending on what's going on within our game world and what parameters are being effective, which is really important to know. I've had a few people actually ask me about how you can have audio fade in and out, and it's something I probably should have touched on sooner, because it's fairly easy to do, or at least in the basic sense it's fairly easy to do. So yeah, let's have a look at how we would set that up. First, let's have a look at the scene I've set up. This is just a quick demonstration to show you guys, what we're talking about specifically. Let's start this scene. So what I've got here is a little player and a box, right? And whenever the player walks into the box is going to trigger audio. And whenever the player leaves the box is going to trigger the audio to stop, right? But we want to have the audio fade in and out, okay? So obviously we don't know when the player is going to be leaving that box. So we need to set up a way to tell FMOD and Unity how we want the audio to fade out, essentially. Let's quickly show you what I mean. So there we go, that faded in and out. And just to prove to you that that wasn't the audio file, let's do it one more time. So no matter when I leave, it's going to fade in and out. Okay, cool. So like I said, this is really easy to do. So let's jump straight into the FMOD side of things. This is the event I've got set up. I've just called it Test 4 because I was messing around with a load of stuff. And I've just got some simple music playing. Let's quickly get rid of this loop region. And let's have a listen. So as you can see, the music doesn't fade in. It comes in straight away, and it also stops straight away. Okay, so this is what we're working with. Now, if you had audio that you just wanted to play once and then be done with in a one shot, what you could do, the most easiest way to add fade-ins is by coming to the edge of your audio region and just dragging, and then you'll create a little fade region which you can, manipulate how you like. You can also do it to fade out as well. So let's quickly drag that to the beginning. And it fades it in, right? Problem with this is that it's based on time, which, like I said earlier, we can't rely on a lot of scenarios. There's parameters in our games that will change. It won't rely on time. It won't be what's the word I'm looking for? Not rely. It won't depend on time. It won't work with. You know what I mean? So we can't use the timeline because parameters in the game will change whenever they need to, essentially. So this isn't really an option for us. In our case, obviously, the player decides when this audio needs to fade in and out. So we need to set it up as such. And the easiest way to do that is with modulation. So what I'm going to do is right-click on the volume dial here on my track, add modulation, and instead of going random, which I normally do, I'm going to go AHDSR, which stands for attack. It even says it here: attack, hold, decay, sustain, release. Which, if any of you guys are familiar with, you'll know that's to do with volume enveloping, which is essentially what we're doing here, except we're not basing it on time. Well, we kind of are. You'll see what I mean in a sec. So let's have a look at these values that we're working with. This little graph here we've got, you can kind of imagine this as a timeline, similar to the one we've got up here, where the y-axis is our volume and the x is time. Except the cursor's not going to be moving at a steady rate like it does up here. It's going to be stopping in a few places. So let's have a look. First, let's look at the initial value, which is nice and simple. This is basically saying what volume do we want our audio to start on, right? So 9 times out of 10, you'll probably want it on -infinity or nothing because you'll want it to fade in, and that's what we're focusing on. But you can change this to whatever you want. You could have it come in extra loud and then drop down straight away. It's up to you. And as you can see, as I change this value or scroll up and down, it will change the graph as such. And you could do it the other way. I can grab this dot and change it there, and it would change the value down on initial. So I'm going to leave that at the bottom. Next is attack. Now, what attacks in time, not decibels, and this is essentially saying how long do we want our audio to move from this value here to this value here, which is the peak volume, essentially how loud we want the volume to max out at. Okay, so if I adjust the attack to say 2 seconds, you'll see this line gets a little bit less steep. And if I adjust the peak value, you'll see this line here rises and decreases. So I could say, okay, so I want it to start at 0. After 3 seconds, I want the volume to go from nothing to -5 decibels, okay? It's up to you. Again, I'm just probably going to keep these. Actually, do you know what? I think let's keep attack 1. Peak, we will bring down a bit just so we can differentiate it from the rest of the points on the graph. So hold is next. Now, hold is essentially saying how long do we want our volume to stay at the peak level, which in this case is minus 19.5. It defaults to 1 second, but we can change that to a maximum of 60 or a minimum of 0. Let's just go 6. Why not? Just again, so you can see the graph quite clearly. No, we'll go a bit higher. We'll go 22. We'll go 22. Next is Decay. Decay basically says how long do we want the hold value? Oh, sorry, not the hold value. How long do we want it to take to change from the peak volume value to the sustain volume value? Now, in most volume envelopes indoors, you probably won't get a peak. Stumbling on my words. Slow down, Henry. You won't get a peak value. It will probably just jump straight to sustain. The reason why we have this too is because remember we haven't imagine a little cursor here moving along the time. It's not going to be going from this point here to this point here, you know, constantly. It's going to be stopping in places. Okay. So in fact, it's going to be stopping at the peak. Essentially, sorry, not the peak. It's going to be stopping at the sustain. So once we get to here, we want to say how long it takes for the peak value to change to the sustain value, which again we can change like so, or you know, messing around with this here, up to you. And then once we've set our sustain value, we want to say, okay, how long do we want it to go from that sustain value to nothing, essentially, which is our release value here. Again, it's done in time, so we can say, oh, we want it to be a really long fade out or a quick fade out. It's up to you. So you can mess around with this however you want. I think for the sake of this, no, actually, we'll mess around with it. We'll go about, we'll have a 1 second fade in. We'll go peak, about minus, there we'll go minus 14. Hold, let's do about 4 seconds. Decay, let's do another 4 seconds. Sustain, let's make it quite drastic so we can hear the difference. So we'll go a little bit louder than usual. And then release, we'll have it about 1, yeah, about there. Okay, so I'm going to set this up into our game and we'll have another listen to the scene I built and see how our new volume envelope is going to affect the sound we hear from this box. So let's jump straight into it. And hopefully we should hear those different parts of the envelope. So there's the attack going into the peak. So after a while, it should slowly change to the sustain. There we go, so it's louder. And then if I leave, it releases, okay? I don't know if you could hear me trying to speak over the volume there. I might have set the sustain too loud. But there you go. Hopefully you heard, if we jump back in FMOD, hopefully you heard that it took 1 second from it to go to nothing to the peak value. After that, which was quite quiet, after that it took 4 seconds to go from the peak value to the sustain value, where it would hold. It will basically sit there for as long as the player is in that trigger box. Once the player left, oh sorry, I forgot Decay. Once it hit minus 14 dB, it would take 4 seconds to go from that to sustain. That's when it would hold. And then once we left the trigger box, it would then change from 1.5 dB to, or it would take 1.4 seconds to change from 1.5 dB to nothing, essentially. Cool. And that's pretty much the simplest way you can do it. So that's everything in FMOD. Let's now have a look. Oh, whoops, I'm still in the game. Forgot about that. Let's now have a look at what we can do with our C# code. Now, you can use this kind of modulation. I'm pretty sure anyway. You can use this with just the FMOD Studio event emitter. It should, if you just pick your parameters when you want it to start, when you want it to stop, and you choose your event, it should just do it naturally. However, if you're planning on creating your own script, which I've done here, 1 or 2 things to note. So I've just created a little script called fade test. Literally all this does is say when the player's in the trigger box, we want sound to play, and when they leave, we want it to stop, right? All of this stuff here we've covered before, so I'm not really going to talk about, but I'll quickly go over it. The stuff I've got in my void start method and the... excuse me. Oh, I burped then. All this stuff here, we are basically setting up our instance, so we're creating an instance of our sound to play. And then in the update function, I've just got a line that basically tells Unity that we're dealing with a 3D sound and we want it to play in a specific position, even though I'm pretty sure I changed this to 2D in the end. But there you go. If you want to use that, you can. what we need to look at is all this stuff here. So Ontriggerenter, this method here, I've just said, I want my sound to start, okay? Dead simple, anyone can set this up. You just copy and paste that, bang, you'll get the sound to play whenever the player enters a trigger box. Now on trigger exit, I've got two different lines here. One I've deactivated at the moment and one is activated. So as you can see, we're basically using two sort of functions that come with the FMOD API, start and stop, right? Start comes with brackets and so does stop, but with stop, we have to write this line here. Otherwise, it's not going to stop the sound. You'll get an error. You need to add this information, which is pretty simple stuff. In a lot of my other videos, I've always just used this line because it basically means if anyone was using fade outs, as you can see here, I'll talk about that in a sec. If anyone was using fade outs with their audio, it should have worked. With this one, it won't. As you can see, this is basically how we tell Unity and FMOD we want it to fade out. If you've got anything like, you know, our modulation activated here, we want it to read it and we want it to fade out. The other option is here, if I just quickly get rid of those two lines and deactivate this one. The other option here is instead of at the end of this sentence, at the end of this dot, writing allow fade out, we can put immediate. So the difference here is it will essentially ignore, that was, pretend you didn't see that. It'll essentially ignore this modulation, or at least I think it will ignore the release of it. It might actually, let's test it out actually. I should have done this earlier. So I'm pretty sure it would just ignore the release of the modulator, I've done it again, of the modulator, and the rest of it should follow. So this would be quite interesting actually. Let's quickly save our script. Let's jump back into Unity and let's see if we can hear our modulation. So remember, it should take about 1 second for the volume to come in. After 4 seconds, it should get louder. And then when I leave, we'll see if it drops out or if it cuts out immediately. Okay, so this is the hold position. Decay rising into sustain. And if I leave, oh, there we go. Cool. So we've all just learned something there. Okay, so if you add immediate, essentially what you're doing is telling it to, I keep doing that. Ignore any fade outs. Ignore the release on the modulator. I imagine if you've added a fade out like this, we'll ignore that as well. And I believe the reason why is probably for saving a little bit of time, or not time, saving CPU power. You know, there's no point in adding this extra bit, having Unity check for any fade outs if you've added on an FMOD. So if you know for a fact you won't be fading out your audio, you might as well stop it by adding the immediate. Those are your two options. Just had to make a quick edit because whilst we obviously been talking about fade-ins and fade-outs specifically, you don't have to stop with AHDSR modulation just there. You could do this to essentially any value or any parameter you've got set up in FMOD. For example, let's quickly see if we can mess around with the pitch, why not, of this audio we've got going on. So if I grab my pitch value here and click add modulation, AHDSR, quickly give it some random values, why the hell not, play the audio and see what happens. Oh, listen to that. Whoa. There we go. So I thought I'd just share that as well. One thing also, as I'm sure you've just noticed there that I forgot to mention, so I just hit stop on my keyboard, or you know, the space bar to stop the event. But you should notice that in FMOD it will actually, you know, trial any modulation you've set up with the AHDSR modulator. So for example, that release, it'll actually wait for the release time to end before it stops it completely, just to give you an idea of what it's going to sound like. Thanks for that. Apologies for forgetting that, but back to the normal video. Cool. And I think with that is everything. Now, I would like to know if you guys enjoyed this, because there is a few more things you can do with fade outs and fade ins and, you know, AHDSR, whatever it's called, modulation. So it'd be really interesting to see if you guys actually found this useful, or you want to see us mess around with some more scenarios with this kind of stuff. But yeah, as always, I hope you enjoyed watching. The script that I've just used here, if you want, you can copy it off the screen now, but I will have it on my website, and a link will be in the description for you to follow and find this on my website, so you can just quickly copy and paste it. Let me know if you enjoyed this, and hopefully I've got a few more FMOD and Unity ideas coming up soon. Yeah, I think that's everything, isn't it? Yeah. Maybe follow me on Twitter as well, at HenryScott0. I want to kind of get some more Twitter stuff going, talk about some more game audio stuff, share any articles. So that's everything you wanted to. Cool. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.